Alrighty, welcome everybody. In this video, we're going over the Active Directory basics room in the Cybersecurity 101 track. It's kind of the last part of Windows and AD fundamentals, and it is a doozy. All right, it says it's easy. It's 30 minutes. If you're familiar with Active Directory, this will be an easy room. If you are not familiar with Active Directory, there's going to be a whole lot of concepts being thrown at you. It's all good stuff. It's just going to be a lot. So, our room objectives, we're going to learn about Active Directory and become with the following topics. So, we're going to learn what Active Directory is, what an Active Directory domain is, the components that go into an Active Directory domain, force and domain trust, as well as some more such as authentication methods, learn about Kerberos and things like that. So, it is not a light room. It is easy to get through the room, I would say, but actually understanding what we're talking about, it's one of those things where they can go over it really quickly, but it is a foundational piece of being in the industry just because of how integrated Active Directory is with the entire kind of workforce of majority of the world. All right, so let's go ahead and start. Windows domains. Picture yourself administering a small business network on with only 5 computers and 5 employees. All right, it's such a tiny network you could probably be able to configure each computer separately without a problem. So you'll manually log into each computer, you'll create users for whoever will use them, and make specific configurations for each employee accounts. So if a user computer stops working, you'll probably just go to their place and fix it on site. So while this sounds like a very relaxed lifestyle, let's suppose your business suddenly grows and now has 157 computers and 320 different users located across 4 different offices. Would you still be able to manage each computer as a separate entity? Manually configure policies for each one of the users across the network and provide on-site support for everybody? The answer is most likely no, because it is. All right, that is not feasible for one employee. When businesses try to do that, bad things happen. All right, nobody's happy in that. So to overcome these limitations, we can use a Windows domain. Simply put, a Windows domain is a group of users and computers under the administration of a given business. So the main idea behind a domain is the centralized administration of common components of a Windows computer network in a single repository called Active Directory, also abbreviated as AD. All right. So the server that runs the Active Directory services is known as a domain controller. All right. So when we're talking about AD, you can have a domain controller because that is what runs the actual service. That is what it it is so key to actually making everything function. It just is. All right. So here's a little domain diagram. The domain is tryhackme.com. We have file servers, database servers, desktops, workstations. You're gonna have a whole bunch of those. In this instance, there's one domain controller. You can have a whole bunch. You have, it can be extremely complicated depending on the needs. For this example, we are going with, at least in my head, we're going with the 157 computers, 320 different users type of deal. So this is manageable. All right. So the main advantage of having configured Windows domain is its centralized identity management. So all users across the domain, um, they can be configured with Active Directory with minimal effort. It is fairly straightforward, and that means that Miss Sue in finance can sit down at a computer in her home office, run to a different site, and be able to log in there as well. If you were still doing this small scale local accounts, she would need then the local account made on that other computer, everything like that. So, um, Active Directory is a blessing for administrators as well as enterprise. Also, it says managing security policies, so you can configure security policies directly from Active Directory and apply them to users and computers across the network as needed. That is very important, just from the administration side of things. So here's a real world example. So if this sounds a bit confusing, chances are you have already interacted with Windows domain at some point in your school, university, or work. In school university networks, you'll often be provided with a username and password that you can use on any of the computers available on campus. Your credentials are valid for all machines because whenever you input them on a machine, it will forward the authentication process back to Active Directory where your credentials will then be checked. Thanks to Active Directory, your credentials don't need to exist on each machine and are available throughout the network. So pretty much same thing. Um, Active Directory is also the component that allows your school university to restrict your access from the control panel feature. on your university machines, and policies will usually be deployed throughout the network so you don't have administration privileges over those computers. That's fairly common. Normal users won't have the ability to just install whatever they find, exes, whatever, willy-nilly. If they do, then yeah, that they definitely should harden that. But anyway, let's welcome to THM Inc. So during this task, you'll assume the role of a new IT admin at THM Inc. As our first task, we have been to ask to review the current domain, which is thm.local, and do some additional configurations. You will have administration credentials over a pre-configured domain controller to do the task. So we've already started this. So we started our machine, and that is, let's see, is it this guy right here? No, so I have my attack box, and here we go. All right, so we're connecting via, no, oh, whoops, my bad. Who am I? Let me figure this out. All right, don't think we need to connect this to RDP because we are starting the machine. It will just auto log in with these credentials. So in a Windows domain, credentials stored in a centralized repository called Active Directory. All right. And the server in charge of running the Active Directory service is called the domain controller. So what's important to know about this is you can have a whole bunch of domain controllers inside of an Active Directory. You might do that for redundancy if you're a large organization. Those domain controllers will have relationships between each other. That way there's not conflict where if a user is changing password here and somehow they're able to change password at the same exact time on another server in a different place in the world, they have the exact same information. There's a hierarchy to it. But cool. So we are in our domain controller over here, and this is fairly typical. Windows server has the same interface for the most part as a Windows workstation. Typically, you'll have some things disabled though because you really want to slim down the servers who only be able to run what you're expecting them to run. This is a domain controller, so we should have stuff like Active Directory users in computers, and this looks like a group policy or something like that. So let's get into Active Directory. The core of any Windows domain is the Active Directory Domain Service. So this is abbreviated as ADDS. You're going to see that a lot. This service acts as a catalog that holds the information of all objects that exist on your network. So looking over here, these say that they're users, they're objects. Okay. Amongst the many objects supported by ID, we have users, groups, machines, printers, shares, and many others. So let's take a look at them. Users are one of the most common object types in Active Directory. Users are one of the objects known as security principals, meaning that they can be authenticated by the domain and be assigned privileges over resources like files and printers. So you could say that security principal is an object that can act upon resources in the network. So users can be used to represent two types of entity. You have people. So users are generally represented by a person in your organization that need access to the network, like employees. If you've logged in, typically if you're not an administrator or something like that, where you have additional access to other accounts if you have one account typically or just a regular user account. All right. You can also have services. So you can also define users to be used by services such as ISS, which is internet facing stuff, or MS SQL. So if you have a database, every single service requires a user to run. But service users are different from regular users as they will only have the privileges needed to run their specific service, which then can make them become fairly juicy targets. If you have a specific target in mind for a service, well, there's going to be an accompanying account, because it requires users to run it. So just thinking information security wise, everyone wants, global admin, things like that. If you can compromise a potential service, that is a good way in. All right. Moving on, machines. So machines are another type of object within Active Directory. For every computer that joins Active Directory domain, a machine object will be created. So if we look into computers here, bam, look at these. All right. And machines are also considered security principals and are assigned an account just as any regular user, and this account has somewhat limited rights within the domain itself. The machine accounts themselves are local administrators on the assigned computer. They're generally not supposed to be accessed by anyone except for the computer itself, but as with any other account, if you have a password, you can use it. So, like the account on PC Daniels, its local admin account is going to have different credentials than the one on PC Mark. Um, Nope. Machine account passwords are automatically rotate out and generally comprise of 120 random characters. And identifying machine accounts are relatively easy. They follow a specific naming scheme. So it's a machine account name. It's typically the computer's name followed by a dollar sign. So if your machine is DC01, so probably your main domain controller there, it will have a machine account called DC01 dollar sign. Okay. Next, we're going into security groups. So if you're familiar with Windows, you probably know that you can define user groups to assign rights to files or other resources to entire groups instead of single users. This allows for better manageability as you can add users to an existing group. They will automatically inherit all the group's privileges. And security groups are also considered security principals and therefore can have privileges over resources on the network. If you, excuse me, sorry. If you are at a well-maintained enterprise, there are going to be so few entries that are actual single users being assigned to a resource, mainly because it is bad hygiene. Um, Whoever put that user in there, they're eventually going to retire. They might get promoted. They might leave that position, or they might stay in it and they might just forget that the person has access to that one thing because they're administering everything else through groups properly. So it's a bad form to see that. I'm not saying enterprises don't have that. They do, but just on a big scale thing, it is not properly scalable. It's much more tedious. It requires a lot more effort. But sometimes there are use cases where it's like that this person just needs access to this one thing. The proper thing would then be to create a relevant group, assign that user to that group, and have the group assigned to that. But you're gonna see it. It's out there. It's a People are able to do it. They're going to do it. All right. So looking at, let's see, groups can have both users and machines as members. If need, groups can include other groups as well, so you can nest groups. So several groups are created in by default in the domain, and they can be used to grant specific privileges to users. As an example, here are some of the most important groups in a domain. So if we go over here to users, we're going to see these right here, they're little group icons. All right. So we have domain admins right there. We have server operators, which is not going to be listed in this OU. Um, it it is simply in here. It might just be in a different little category here. So bam, there we go. If we look in built-in over here, we do have the server operators here. We have the backup operators, account operators, domain users, domain computers, domain controllers. You can read these descriptions. There's also the descriptions over here where you can kind of see what is going on about. I'm not going to run through all those. It also has a list here saying you can go to Microsoft documentation to read a little bit more. To configure users, we're going to use Active Directory users and computers, which is what we're in right now. So that was this little icon over here. You can open up if it's not there, hitting the start button, searching for it. Now, uh, let's see, this open window, you can see the hierarchy of users, computers, and groups that exist in the domain. So we are in this domain of thm.local. All right. Um, these objects are organized within organizational units, so OUs, which are the container object that allows you to classify users and machines. So OUs are mainly used to define sets of users with similar policing requirements. So yep, but I was just about to say different departments. Yep, here we go. So the people in the sales department of your organization are likely to have a different set of policies applied to the people in IT. For example, keep in mind the user can only be part of a single OU at a time. So in these OUs, when we look at it, we have OUs for IT, management, marketing, research development, and sales. Here are the users that are within here. Fill-up will not be existing in management or marketing and things like that, just because different rights, privileges, and everything, permissions can be assigned to each one of these. Maybe you do it extremely, I guess, extremely well organized, and say in your environment, IT can log into all machines, they can access all printers. Management can only log into um, certain workstations on this floor of a building, and they can only access certain printers. That's just a physical part of it. You can also think about, their file network shares. Like the marketing team probably doesn't need much access to research and development files, but they might need a little bit from sales. Maybe it's only one particular file or folder that's shared out that way. So OUs are very important for the actual administration of an enterprise. Sorry if you guys can hear that. My rice is ready. But checking on our machine, we can see that there's already an OU called TryHackMe with 4 OUs. I'm counting 5, but it says 4. So we have IT, management, marketing, and sales department. So research and development is a different change from what they have here. Don't worry about that. All right. It's very typical to see OUs mimics the business structures as it allows for efficiently deploying baseline policies that apply to the entire departments. Remember that while this would be the expected model, most of the time you can define OUs arbitrarily. Feel free to right click on the TryHackMe OU and create an OU under it called students just for the fun of it. So we're going to right click, we're going to hit new. We want a new organizational unit, and it is called students. Sorry, caps lock was on students. And then when we're making it, we have this little checkbox which protect container from accidental deletion. You probably should always have that. That way you can't just hit the delete button here and blow away all of the contents of it. That is a bad day for like your administration team. All right. So if you open any OUs, you can see the users that they can say and perform simple tasks like creating, deleting, and modifying them as needed. You can also perform password resets, which is pretty useful for the help desk. Most administrators will have access to all the functions in here, while help desk accounts, they might only be limited to be able to reset passwords and things like that. And so your help desk might just have this running on their machines, and so that they can say, oh, Philip needs to get in. Well, let's be real. Mark from marketing came in from vacation. He doesn't remember his password, so they can right click here, reset his password. All right. There should probably be some steps to identify that Mark's actually Mark, but we're not going into that here. We're just showing functionality. All right. So you probably already noticed that there are other default containers apart from the TryHackMe OU. These shares are created by Windows automatically and contain the following. You have built-in computers, domain controllers, users, and managed service accounts. All right. You can read those descriptions. They're pretty self-explanatory. All right. So security groups versus OUs. You're probably wondering why we have both groups and OUs. While both are used to classify users' computers, their purposes are entirely different. So OUs are handy for applying policies to users and computers, which includes specific configurations that pertain to sets of users, depending on a particular role in the enterprise. So remember, a user can only be part of a single OU at a time, and it wouldn't make sense to try to apply 2 different sets of policies to a single user. You want it clean. All right, so 1 OU per 1 user, 1 set of policies. Now, security groups, on the other hand, they're used to grant permission over resources. So for example, you use groups if you want to allow some users access to a shared folder or a network printer. A user can be part of many groups, which is needed to grant multiple resources. In my example earlier about people logging into particular workstations and things, that can be attained through groups as well. In my head, policy wise, that's one way to do it, but it can be done through a security group. So which group normally administrates all computers and resources in a domain? So if we're looking at groups, let's got built-in groups. So it says administrates. So we're probably talking about admins. Because it's domain, we're gonna go with domain admins, which I don't even see it there, but let's go ahead and domain admins is over here. There we go. So domain admins. So what would be the name of a machine account associated with the machine named Tom PC? If you remember, the blueprint of it, nomenclature, is device name, then dollar sign. There we go. And suppose our company creates a new department for quality assurance. What type of containers should we use to group all quality assurance users so that policies can be applied consistently to them? Remember, we probably don't want security groups. We want an organizational unit. All right, so organizational unit. Boom, there we go. It's plural. All right, that was task 3. Moving on to task 4. All right, so your first task as the new domain administrator is to check the existing ADOUs, so the Active Directory organizational units, and users. As some recent changes have happened to the business, you have been given the following organizational chart and are expected to make changes to the AD to match it. All right, so it looks like we're going to be removing some people. Maybe somebody got promoted, maybe somebody moved laterally. We're going to now match this organizational chart to what we have. So if you notice, we're just going to check real quick. So in management, we do have Daniel. In marketing, we have Mark. In sales, we have Sophie and Thomas. So Robert and Christine are no longer there. In IT, we have Philip, Mary, and Claire. We made that students one. And research and development has Bob. So it looks like there's potentially 3 changes here, users, and one that might be needed to go ahead and get removed. So the first thing you should notice is there additional department OU in your student AD configuration that doesn't appear in the chart. We have been told that it was closed due to recent budget cuts. It should be removed. If you try to right click it, you'll get the following error. So if we look, we have management, marketing, sales, and IT. So research and development did get cut. So if we right click and if we hit delete, so it says you don't have sufficient privileges to delete research and development, or this object is protected from accidental deletion. If you remember, we should be on an admin account, so we should be able to. So we probably just need to go and be able to click off. Remember when we made the students one, add that checkbox? We're going to remove that checkbox. So we need to enable advanced features. So if we do view, advanced features, bam. Now, if we go into where are we at? So we need TryHackMe, research and development. We're gonna right click. We're gonna go into properties. We're gonna go into object. This right here, protect object for accidental deletion. We'll apply. We'll hit OK. Now we're gonna right click. We're gonna delete, and we're gonna hit yes. And it's going to warn us, hey, if you do this, then you're going to delete all the objects it contains. So what objects are we talking about? We're talking about Bob. All right. So Bob is probably going to be deleted right here. We hit yes. And now if we look at our employees, like Bob doesn't get put just out of nowhere into the TryHackMe OU. No, we deleted his OU, so that that object is now gone as well. So it's a very dangerous thing to have in an environment, to have that protection disabled. Um, if you are trying to remove users, typically, you will have a whole deprovisioning process as an enterprise, and Bob would not just get deleted. Bob would go into like an OU for inactive users or something like that with very restricted, we're not expecting nobody to log into this account, proper security measures over there, but we don't want to just delete users' objects that way because it can create a whole lot of headaches later. Like, what if Bob got transferred? Like, yeah, they said that they cut him, but then, next week HR says actually Bob's back and he's now part of marketing. And all the junk that you just deleted, um, it's gone here. So it's not proper. It for the example, perfect. Boom. In reality, hitting delete like that, it's a lot more is going on there. All right. So moving on. Delegation. One of the nice things you can do in AD is give specific users control over some OUs. So this process is known as delegation and allows you to grant users specific privileges to perform advanced tasks on OUs without needing a domain administrator to step in, which is great because maybe your administration team don't got time to be dealing with help desk level, hey, I forgot my password resets. All right. So one of the most common uses for this is granting IT support privileges to reset other low privilege users' passwords. You notice it said low privilege users' passwords. The staff of IT support should not be resetting high privilege accounts, as in break glass accounts, domain admins accounts, things like that. So in an enterprise, typically there's a different workflow if an administrator might require their password to be reset versus normal Joe Schmo because of the additional permissions and level of access that those accounts have over other ones. Like you don't want your help desk going through one day and messing with all the passwords, let's say, for that can cripple the enterprise. All right. I'm not saying insider threat or anything. All I'm saying is maybe somebody's about to get fired and they're doing one last hurrah of I hate everybody. All right. Um, so according to our organizational chart, Philip is in charge of IT support, so we probably want to delegate control over saying passwords over the sales, marketing, and management OUs to him. So how we do that is we go like over into sales. We'll hit delegate control. We'll hit next. We want to add a user and we'll type in Philip. Then we do check names. You need the object name here to be an underlined one. If not, then it won't actually associate what you typed in to any actual objects. All right, so we're gonna hit next. And here are common tasks that you can assign to him. You can also customize them as well. So for this one, we are going to say we want him to reset user passwords, enforce user passwords at next logon. Cool, then we'll go ahead and hit finish. I'm going to quickly do that for these other ones as well. So again, we hit add, we go over here, we type Philip the best that we can, we do check names, okay, reset users, boom, there we go, cool. And as well of management. All right, so delegate control, next, add Philip. And if you notice at the end of this, it will give you a nice little summary of what just happened. So, boom, this Active Directory folder management. Notice it says folder, like we're viewing it as an OU. It's just saying it's a folder, and you have given Philip this account, this ability. So it could be a group, users, or computers. Typically, you wouldn't just give it to Philip. You would give it to the IT, like a like the whole group of IT help desk type of deal. All right. So we've gone through, done that. Now it's saying, let's use Philip's account to try to reset Sophie's password. So here are Philip's credentials to log in via RDP. When we started this box in this lesson, it automatically gave us logged in as admin. All right. We're not going to have the option to just switch over, otherwise it will kill the session. So this is where we are going to RDP through our Linux system. All right. Different labs or different lessons will have different configurations. Maybe we'll give you a generic Windows VirtualBox that then you can, RDP in that way. We're just going to RDP through Linux. All right. And to use that, we're going to use something called xfree RDP. All right. So you're going to open up terminal. You're going to do xfree RDP. You're going to hit space. Then we're going to put in the server IP, which is 10.10.244.190. This is going to be different for you. All right. For me, I have my attack box IP up here, and this is my 80 my domain controller one right here. And if all goes well, bam, we're now RDP'd in and it has our login screen here. So when we're looking at this, this tells us a good amount. So right now we have 80 basics /root. That's not the domain that we want to log into. We want to log into the TryHackMe domain. So that was just the local machine right there, and it was the root account. We want to log in as Philip, and we have a password here that's been provided to us. We'll go ahead and log in like that, and this should get us in as Philip. So what's fun is Philip in this exercise does not have access to Active Directory users and computers. Most enterprises will have their help desk in there because it's a GUI and it makes it easy. So we're now going to change, what is it? Blah, blah. We're going to reset Sophie's password as Philip. So to do that, we're going to use good old PowerShell. All right. So what we're doing, we're setting the AD account password. That's what I want you to do. On Sophie's account, we want to reset it. We want a new password. If you're wondering where I'm getting this from, it's just this right here. All right. So could copy and paste it. Probably should, because there's probably gonna be a typo here. But when it comes to a lot of PowerShell, I do like to type it out just so I'm familiar with what's going on. You guys don't have to do that. You guys are probably much more smarter than me, but I do like to mess around in PowerShell a lot, and I like to type. All right, so something did not go right here. So set AD account password, Sophie, tac reset, tac new password, read host as a secure string, prompt for new password. It didn't do that because of, all right, so I go and cancel that. All right. So what I just messed up there is my quotes. I did a single quotation, then a double quotation. All right. So, boom. So yeah, this part is completely for me. I just like dealing with with this part of it. As I said, you guys please just copy and paste. All right. All right. So single quote, new password. Boop. Close it, and then I want verbose. So what I want it to say is new password. There we go. All right. And we're going to set this to a very generic, like password 123 type of deal. And there we go. So it said the operation got performed. If he did not have access to that, like if we didn't delegate it to him, then it will just say, hey, you can't do that. This is also saying, since we want Sophie to keep on using a password we know, we can also force password reset at the next logon with this, where you do set AD user, change password at login, true identity, Sophie, verbose. I'm not going to do that. We're just going to go ahead and log in Sophie's account. So let me go ahead and shut that session down. In terminal, we're doing X free RDP again, same exact thing. We want the TryHackMe domain. We want the username is Sophie. We are then going to put in the password that you just set. Cool. And what do you know? We have a flag here. So sweet. Let's open up the flag. So what was the flag found on Sophie's desktop? Ugh, really? Okay. Thanks underscore for contacting support. Cool. All right. In the process of granting privileges to user over some OU and other AD object is called. That's that delegation. Delegation. There we go. All righty. We're halfway through it. All right, let's go into managing computers in AD. So I'm going to switch back over to the domain controller over here. So by default, all the machines that can join a domain, except for the DCs, will be put in a container called computers. So let's go into computers. If we check RDC, we'll see that some devices are already there. So we have these server ones, we have a couple laptops, and a couple of regular PCs. And I'm just guessing that based on the nomenclature of this. Most enterprises will have some sort of nomenclature with it. Um, you might be like, well, why would they do that? It's to ease for administration. You can create different policies that can be assigned dynamically. And what you do is you would say, target any computer object that starts with LPT and assign these policies out to them, that type of deal. Okay, so it just makes the enterprise a little bit easier, as well as you can just at a glance know, okay, this person's on laptop, on a PC, or if it's a server type of deal. So it's going to go into, we have some servers, laptops, PCs. Um, Having all of our devices there is not the best idea, since it's very likely that you want different policies for your servers and machines that regular users use on a daily basis. That's correct. All right. So while there's no golden rule on how to organize your machines, and access starting point, segregating devices according to their use in general, you expect to see devices divided into at least three categories of workstations, servers, and domain controllers. All right. So that's at minimum. If you were like in this example, you might want to have a fourth one for laptops. All right. For domain controllers, like workstations are regular things, right? Servers, like laptops and PCs, are both workstations. Just you might want to have different policies. Maybe the power saving policies, things like that, might just want to be separated according to that. Servers, pretty self-explanatory. Domain controllers, let's just read this because we have gone over it a little bit today. So domain controllers are the third most common device within an Active Directory domain. Domain controllers allow you to manage the Active Directory domain. These devices are often indeed the most sensitive devices within the network, as they contain hash passwords for all user accounts within the environment. Super important. Extremely important right there. Your DCs have hash passwords, all right? Makes them an extremely juicy target. All right, since we're tying up our AD, let's create two separate OUs for workstations and servers. So domain controllers are already an OU created by Windows. We will create them directly under the TryHackMe.local domain controller, and then you should have the following OU. Let's see, so the following OU structure. So if we're looking, we have TryHackMe local, we have that right here. What it's saying is domain controllers already has that. What we want to do is new OU. We want one for workstations. Boom. And we want one for servers. All right. So right click new OU. We're going to go over to servers. Bam. Now move the personal computers, laptops to the workstation OUs and the server to the servers OUs from the container. All right. So let's go back into where were we at the beginning. All right. Computers. So we want these guys right here. So all I did was clicked, then hold shift and hit the bottom one. So we have 4 PCs, 3 laptops. All right. There's a couple ways to do this. I like to drag and drop. Yep. And then we have our servers here, and I like to drag and drop. Okay. So now if we look at our servers OUs, we have 3 servers, and in our workstations, we have 7 right here. So after organizing the available computers, how many end up in the workstations OU? We got 7 right there. And is it recommended to create separate OUs for servers and workstations? Yay, because your workstations, they can go down, they can come back up, everything like that. You can have different update policies, things like that. Servers, you definitely want to have a little bit more control over what's going on with them. Maybe they don't need a lot of access to things. They only really need whatever is available for their service. All right, so we're talking about group policies now. So far, we have organized users and computers in OU just for the sake of it. But the main idea behind this is to be able to deploy different policies for each OU individually. All right, so that way we can push different configurations and security baselines to users depending on their department. Windows manages policies through group policy objects. So these are GPOs. All right, if you're in the administration field, you hear it all the time. If you're on the IT side of things, like help desk, gonna you're gonna be very acquainted with what GPOs allow and don't allow. If you're on the security side of thing, you might be the one who's making GPOs policies to harden the network. All right. So GPOs are simply a collection of settings that can be applied to OUs. GPOs contain policies aimed at either users or computers, allowing you to set a baseline on specific machines and identities. So to configure GPOs, you can use the group policy management tool, which is available for the start menu. You can search for it, or there's a shortcut right here. All right. The first thing you'll see when opening is your complete OU hierarchy. All right. Um, as defined before, to configure group policies, you can first create a GPO under group policy objects, which is where we're at right here. Sorry, the screen is not the biggest. There we go. And then link the OU to where you want the policies applied. For example, you can see there are already some existing GPOs in your machine. So we have this default domain policy and an RDP policy. So they like your default one, honestly, that's very typical. You're going to have that because that gets signed to everything. And then they have an RDP policy that might state that only some workstations or maybe some users can only have RDP privileges to certain, other devices, things like that. But anyway, let's keep on going. We also have these group policy objects. So we have default domain controller policy, default domain policy, and RDP policy. So if you're like, hey, what the hell? They're more than one place. They're linked. All right. So that's what this little hyperlink thing is right here. Well, not hyperlink, but the little arrow. So you have selected a link to a group policy object, except changes to link properties. Changes you make here are global for the GPO and will impact all other locations where this GPO is linked. That way you don't have to do it a bajillion other times. All right. So we can see in the image above that we have 3 GPOs created, 1, 2, and 3. From those, we got default domain policy, RDP policy, which are linked to the domain as a whole. And then your default domain controller policies is linked to the domain controller. So if we open up domain controllers, there it is. All right. Um, Something important in mind is that any GPO will apply to the linked OU and any sub OUs under it. For example, the sales OU will still be affected by the default domain policy because it's applied here at the domain level and all the OUs underneath it, right? Even though sales is all the way down here under TryHackMe, you might be like, hey, well, shouldn't it be linked over here? Nope, you view it like a whole tree and things. So if it's at the top, it's going to cascade down, right? So let's examine the default domain policy to see what's inside of a GPO. So we'll go over here. The first tab you will see is the scope, which is this guy. So it tells you where it's linked, and it is linked at the thm.local domain. All right. If we click over here on the domain default domain controllers policy one, you can see it's linked at the domain controllers one. All right. As you can see, you can also apply security filtering to GPOs that they're only applied to specific users or computers underneath the OU. By default, they'll apply to authenticated users group, which includes all users in PC. All right. Excuse me. Let's see. The settings tab includes the actual contents of the GPO. So if we're over on settings, it generates a report of it. If you ever exported like local policy and stuff, it comes in this format. So it'll show you we have user configuration is enabled, computer configuration is enabled in your general things. User configuration has no settings applied, but if we go over here to say show in security settings, you'll see we have a password policy, account lockout policy, Kerberos policy. We're going to be talking about Kerberos in a minute. Security options, encrypting file systems. So this password policy, if you look, there's enforced password history. It remembers 24 passwords remembered. Maximum password age is 42. Minimum password age is 1 day. Just all the characteristics of how users can set what their password is and if it needs to be complex and things like that. So now it's asking for us to change the minimum password policy length to have at least 10 characters in our passwords. So what we're going to do here is we're going to hit edit. This will open this guy up. we need to navigate to where that setting is. We have computer configuration and user configuration. Let's see, we should be under policies, then Windows settings. We're going to security settings. Once it loads up, boom, then account policies. Then we want password policies. Alrighty, and here we go. So we are going to change the length from 7 characters up to 10. All right, then we'll hit apply, we'll hit OK. All right, and let's see, as you can see, plenty of policies can be established via GPO. While explaining every single one of them will be impossible to do in a single room, do feel free to explore a bit, as some of the policies are straightforward. If more information on any of the policies is needed, you can double click them and read the explain tab on each. So, like, let's talk about must meet password complexity requirements. If you don't know exactly what that is, here it is explaining it, saying what exactly they're looking for complexity. So it must be at least 6 characters in length, contain 3 um, characters have to contain 3 out of the 4 categories. So uppercase, lowercase, numbers, and then non-alphabetic. So things like that. There's a whole bunch of settings, as it said. Do feel free to poke around just to see what is available simply by default for a server. There can be many other ways to add more features. There can be tons of custom things, but remember, we're in the foundations. Poke around in here so that you can understand what can be typically assigned out through group policy objects. All right, let's see. So let's talk about distribution. Group policy objects are distributed to the network via a network share called sysvol. All right, and that's stored in the DC, and all users in the domain should typically have access to this share over the network to sync their GPOs periodically. So the sysvol shares points by default to the c/windows/sysvol/sysvol folder directory on each one of the DCs in our network. Ugh. So once a change has been made by any GPOs, it might take up to 2 hours for computers to catch up. If you want to force any particular computer to sync its GPOs immediately, you can always run the following command, which is gp update space /force. All right. If you're into administration and troubleshooting stuff, you probably run into this a lot. All right, because you'll make a change and then you don't want it to wait to sync. No, the person needs access to something right away, so you make the change on the back end or whatever, and then on their computer you run this command and it pulls down the new GPO changes. All right, so we're on the creating some GPOs for TryHackMe Inc. As part of our new job, we have been tasked with implementing some GPOs to allow us to block non-IT users from accessing the control panel and make workstation servers lock their screen automatically after 5 minutes of user activity to avoid people leaving their sessions exposed. Both good policies. So let's focus on each one of these and define what policies we should enable in each GPO and where they should be linked. So we want to restrict access from normal users having access to the control panel. And this is going to go across all machines to only the users. Or, oh wait, hold on. Let me just read word for word on this so I don't mix this up. We want to restrict access to the control panel across all machines to only the users that are part of the IT department. Users of other departments won't be able to change the system's preferences. So let's create a new GPO that's called restrict control panel access and open it for editing. All right. So let's go into, let's see, let me just start. I don't need to be in here right now. Let's close, close. I'm just going to start fresh. Alrighty, this is what I want. Group policy management. So we want a group policy object. We want new. We're going to call it restrict control panel access. And we want to apply this to specific users. All right, so we have restrict control panel access. So we want to go to edit. We are going to user configuration. All right. We want policies. We want administrative templates. We want control panel. And if we click on, let's see, control panel here, we have this one, prohibit access to control panel in PC settings. Right now it's not configured. All right. So we want to edit this, and we want to select enabled, hit apply, okay. Now it will show enabled. All right, cool. So once the GPO is configured, we'll need to link it to all the OUs corresponding to users who shouldn't have access to the control panel. In this case, it's going to be marketing, management, and sales. So let's go over here. And what we're going to do is we are going to drag this now to management. Yep, I want to link it. We're going to put in marketing. Yes, I want to link it. And we're going to put into sales. All right. That students one, remember we made that earlier, so we really don't need to manage that. But right now, all the users in here, so in marketing, management, and sales, are not able to access the control panel, but IT is still able to. All right. And if you ask yourself, why am I having new GPOs? I thought this was cybersecurity and stuff. It's because the more knowledge you have in cybersecurity about how the not only network but the domain, how workstations, how users, how all these things work, the easier your job is going to be. It really is. So, do you need to know how to make a GPO and properly administer who can and cannot access a control panel if you're trying to get a job in a SOC? No, you're not going to be asked to do that. Your account probably doesn't have privileges at all for that. However, should it be expected that you know how group policy objects work in a domain? Yes. Okay. Because if a malicious actor is performing scripts that are affecting these types of things, you don't want to just throw your hands up in there and say, oh, something ran. Being able to know how things operate is a very crucial skill. And if you don't know how it works, then you should have a good skill set of knowing how to Google and research and look into how things properly work. All right. Next up is the auto lock GPO. So for the first GPO, regarding screen locking for workstation servers, we would apply it over to workstation servers in the domain controllers OUs we created previously. While the solution should work, an alternative consists of simply applying the GPU to the root domain, as we want the GPO to affect all our computers. Since workstation servers and domain controllers OUs are all child OUs of the root domain, they will inherit its policies. So that's what we're talking about of linking it up here and having it go to everybody. So you might notice that if our GPO is applied to the root domain, it will also be inherited by other OUs like sales or marketing. Since these OUs contain users only, any computer configuration, our GPO will be ignored by them. So what that's saying is, well, if it's up here, then it won't just be going for our workstations and the servers and stuff. It's also going to be going towards these OUs. Won't that be an issue? In Windows environments, you can think of having administration through policies be computer-based or device-based or user-based. And I say device-based because if you are up in the cloud using things like Intune and things like that, your policies that you put into effect typically have that designation of, are you trying to apply it to users or devices? And most of the time, you can't crisscross those. All right. So when you are making policies, you do want to make like, hey, this is a device-based policy or a computer-based policy, like this lockout one. We are making settings that are going for computers. If there are users in there, they're just not really gonna like there's not the relevant object to actually apply the configuration to. Um, Old school AD like this, yeah, it just goes. Like an Intune and stuff. So I'm on a slight tangent here. Newer GUIs fight with you more often, it feels, than the older ones, but it's just how it is. Anyway, this is for auto lock. This one is going to be a computer configuration. I'm going to see if there's actually like if the questions actually regard this. Otherwise, we're just going to talk through this because we just made a GPO, we linked it, we applied it. We're doing the same thing here. Auto lock screen. Here's where it's found. So it's computer configuration policies, Windows settings, security options, interactive login, machine inactivity limit. You're going to set it to 300 seconds. 60 seconds times 5 is 300 seconds. All right. And then after closing the GPO editor, you're going to link it up to the main domain. Then it's going to ask you to RDPN as Mark, and then wait 5 minutes and see if it gets locked. To do that, you would go over into um, terminal on your Linux machine, do X free RDP, RDPN, log in as THM Mark with that, and there you go. All right. If you create a link, the GPOs, but for some reason they still don't work, remember you can run the GP update / force. Again, it might take some time. That will make it pull down the sync, all right? We're not going to, I'm not going to waste everyone's time doing that. If you have questions, if you ran into a hiccup, let me know in the comments so that we see what's going on there. But you guys already did one policy. I believe in y'all. Y'all can probably knock out this next one. So, questions. What is the name of the network share used to distribute GPOs to a domain machine? That was at the very beginning of this, and it's sysvol. If you guys remember that, so we got to scroll all the way back up. But oh boy, actually, it might have been over there as well. Yeah, because it wasn't even. No, it should have been in this one. Anyway, it's sysvol. There we go under GPO distribution. So GPOs are distributed to the network via the network share called sysvol. All right. So bam. Can a GPO be used to apply settings to users and computers? Yay, it can. So that's what we would have done for this auto lock one, where it's up at the well, actually no, that one only went with blah, blah, blah. That one only went with computer configuration settings. You can have a GPO have both of them. So like your default domain one might have settings for both of them. Whew. All right. This video is coming up on an hour. I would love to be like, hey, we're going to zoom right past this. Authentication is extremely important when we're talking about it. Your job in security, understanding Kerberos and how things get authenticated and get the proper tickets and all that good stuff. Out of everything in this lesson, out of everything in Active Directory basics, so the GPOs, how to reset, use passwords, all this other stuff, this understanding this right here. So these 3 diagrams, all right, that's going to carry you forward in security much further than everything else. Yes, don't brain dump that information. It's great foundation to build upon. This is such a great meat and potatoes area for just our industry. So take your time understanding Kerberos authentication. I recommend going on YouTube and having somebody explain exactly what's going on here. I'm going to try my best. It's not going to be nearly as good as people with even better diagrams and cool animations and stuff. I highly, highly recommend watching a great YouTube video or something for what is going on in Kerberos. So let's start. When using Windows domains, all credentials are stored in the domain controllers. Whenever a user tries to authenticate to a service using domain credentials, the service will need to ask the domain controllers to verify if they're correct. 2 protocols can be used for network authentication in Windows domains. One is Kerberos, so that's used by any recent version of Windows, and it's a default protocol in any recent domain. That's what you're going to be running into. And then you have Net and TLM, and then it's a legacy authentication protocol kept for compatibility purposes. All right. So while Net and TLM should be considered obsolete, most networks have both protocols enabled. So let's take a deeper look at each one and how they work. All right. Kerberos authentication is a default authentication protocol for any recent version of Windows. Users who log into a service using Kerberos will be assigned tickets. All right, Kerberos works on tickets. Think of tickets as proof of previous authentication. That way, you're not constantly having to authenticate. You have a ticket saying, hey, I am Quincy and I authenticate at this time. Let me have access to this. All right. So, users with tickets can present them to a service to demonstrate that they have already authenticated into the network before and therefore enabled to use it. So, if you're thinking, you know, bad actor stuff, hey, there are tickets out there that will say that I've already authenticated to to a server. I'm good to go for this or that. That happens. All right. Like tickets can be a juicy target. All right. But when Kerberos is used for authentication, the following process happens. So for this first one, all right, understand we have a client here and we have a domain controller. All right. The user sends their username and timestamp encrypted using a key derived from their password to the key distribution center. So over here, and that's a service that's usually installed on the domain controller in charge of creating Kerberos tickets on the network. All right, it might not be every DC, it might just be this one, depends, but you have a client sending their username and timestamp that's encrypted, all right, over to the key distribution center. The key distribution center will then create and send back a ticket granting ticket, TGT. Remember that, TGT. All right, ticket granting ticket. That's this guy right here, which will allow the user to request additional tickets to specific services. The need for a ticket to get more tickets may sound a bit weird, but allows users to request service tickets without passing credentials every time they want to connect to a service. So, along with the ticket granting ticket, a session key is given to the user, which will need to generate the following requests. All right. So, notice that the ticket granting ticket is encrypted using the KRBTGT pass account passwords hash. So, that's this red one right here, and therefore the user can't access its contents. All right. It's essential to know that the encrypted TGT includes a copy of the session key as part of its contents, and the KDC has no need to store the session key as it can recover it by decrypting a copy of the TGT if it ever needs it. All right. So the user says, I want a golden ticket essentially that will allow me to then request additional tickets based on what I need access to. And the KDC on the domain controller says, all right, cool. Based on what you gave me, I'm going to give you that. It's encrypted. All right. And we're also going to give you this session key. Okay. So now the client has this ticket granting ticket. All right. So as well as the session key. But all right. So now the user, when it wants to connect to to a service on the network like share website or database, they will use their ticket granting ticket to ask the KDC for a ticket granting service. So TGS. Ticket granting service are tickets that allow connections only to that specific service that they were created for. So to request access to a TGS, so the ticket granting service, the user will send their username and time code or timestamp encrypted using the session key that they got previously, along with the TGT, so the ticket granting ticket, and a service principal name, which is going to identify the service and server that they're trying to actually access. That was a lot, but understand when you log in or whatever, you're going to be getting your TGT and your session key. So you're authenticated for that session. All right. Now that you have these things, you just then need to identify to the KDC, hey, I want access to whatever it may be. Let's just say this database. I'm a database administrator. I want access to this table. All right. So I just need to identify, you know, I need access to this table. Maybe it's in MS SQL and it lives on this server, which that is information for the service principal name. All right. So I'm giving all of that to the KDC. All right. So the KDC is now going to send us the ticket granting service, which is this blue one right here, along with a service session key. All right. And that's needed to authenticate to the service we want access to. So you're a lot of session keys, this and that. Okay. When you logged on, when you first authenticate, you got a session key valid for that session. Now that we want particular access to a service, you're also going to get a session key for that service. All right. So in the service session key, it's encrypted using a key from the service owner's hash. You might be like, well, where did that come from? All right. So the service owner itself is a user machine account that the service runs under. So the ticket granting service will contain a copy of the service session key on its own, encrypted so that the service owner can access it by decrypting the TGS. A lot of acronyms, a lot of this, that, this, that, this, that. Understand there are a lot there. You have your sessions, you're gonna have tickets, TGTs, TGSs. All right. Now that you finally have this TGS and a service session key, now you can use that with your username and timestamp, which gets encrypted, to authenticate to the actual server that has your database on it. So you're not needing to talk to the domain controller every time you need to access that service anymore because you have an active session key. Now, there, who knows how long that those are configured in that environment to last, this and that, but big picture here. All right, you log on, you authenticate, you're talking to this domain controller that's running Kerberos, and you say, "Hey, I'm Quincy. I want to log in." And it says, "Hey, you're Quincy. Cool. You're good to go. Here's your ticket grain ticket. Use it as you will throughout your workday." Now that you have that, when it's time to say, I need access for this particular service, I'm going to talk again to Kuros, run on the domain controller, and say, I need access to the SQL database. And it says, cool, here is your ticket granting service, as well as your service session key for this particular service. All right. So, Quincy, as you're working on this for this session, you are good to go. Now, if I want to then jump into another database or whatever that's running on a different server, I'm going to have to do that again. I'm going to have to, my session key is not valid for a different service. Okay. It, I'm going to have to go back, talk to Kerberos on the domain controller, be like, hey, I'm trying to access this now. And we'll say, all right, cool. Give me your TGT again. Give me all this. You know, you identified who you want with the service principal name. And I'm going to check and I'm going to say, you do have access to that. Here's now your TGS and your service session key for that over there. So I can have more than one of those. All right. It just depends on what I need access to. All right. That was a lot. I know it's a lot. Different different abbreviations. Just understand that most Windows environments are going to be running off of Kerberos. All right. And these tickets are going back and forth. When it comes into our world, working in cybersecurity, understand that tickets are not like they're not foolproof. Okay. People can steal sessions, things like that. All right. So that was a lot of me rambling on to try to explain these three diagrams. Again, spend 5 minutes online, get somebody who can explain it a little bit more clear. That way it clicks in your head what's going on with it. Next up is net and SAL1 authentication. It has the 6 steps right here. All right. It's not as complicated, but remember, it is legacy. Like we're gonna go over it, I guess, really quick. Why not? We're already here, and it's it's already a long video. Might as well not cheap out on it now. So we have client, the server, and the domain controller. The client is going to send an authentication request to the server they want to access. All right, that's this right here. The server is going to generate a random number and send it as a challenge back to the client. The client then combines their NTLM password hash with the challenge and other known data or whatever to generate a response to that challenge, and then it's going to send it back to the server as verification. So it says, hey, I got this information. I know I'm adding it to what you just told me, and now I want you to say that this is good to go because I've talked to you and I've shared stuff that's only for my account. We should be good to go, right? So then the server says, all right, that's cool, but that's not my job. So I'm going to send it to the domain controller to actually verify this. So the domain controller receives a challenge in the response. All right. And it will go and it will compare what the server sent and it will compare what the client sent back. And if they match, it'll be happy and it will then tell the server he's good to go, allow him access. If he's not, then he's going to tell the server to deny him and, you know, tell him no, he can't have access to it. All right. So note that the user's password or hash is never transmitted through the network for security. Remember, this hash that we have right here is added to the challenge. All right. So yeah, you're never sending the password or the hash. Now, note the described process applies when using a domain account. If a local account is used, the server can verify the response to the challenge itself without requiring interaction with the domain controller, since it has a password hash stored locally on its SAM. Okay, so we have three questions here. Will a current version of Windows use NetLM as a preferred authentication protocol for default? Nay, it will not. It will use Kerberos by default. When referring to Kerberos, what type of ticket allows us to request further tickets known as TGS, or the ticket granting service ones? We want the ticket granting ticket. All right, so that is this guy right here that we got when we first we got our session and everything going. That's the golden ticket. That'll get you other tickets. All right, and when using net NLM is a user's password transmitted over the network at any point. Look up at the note right there. Nay, it will not. All right. Whew. We're on task 8. We're almost done. So thank you all for coming along with me for this point. All right. Whew. So far, we have discussed how to manage a single domain, the role of domain controller, and how it joins computer servers and users. All right. As companies grow, so do their networks. Having a single domain for a company is good enough to start, but in time, some additional needs might push you to have more than one. All right. So we're looking at this domain, DC root for the domain of tryhackme.local. We're going to talk about trees as a way to remediate this. All right. So imagine, for example, that suddenly your company expands to a new country. The new country has different laws and regulations that require you to update your GPOs to comply. In addition, you now have IT people in both countries, and each IT team needs to manage resources that correspond to each country without interfering with the other teams. Make sense? While you could create complex OU structures and use delegations to achieve this, having a huge AD structure might be hard to manage and prone to human errors. Luckily for us, Active Directory supports integrating multiple domains so that you can partition your networks into units that can be managed independently. All right. If you have two domains that share the same namespace, so thm.local, for example, those domains can be joined into a tree. So if our thm.local domain was split into two subdomains for the UK and US branches, you could build a tree with a root domain of thm.local. This is top one. Then we have two subdomains, one over here of uk.thm.local and this one of us.thm.local. And if you notice, each one also has their own domain controllers and all this fun stuff as well. All right. So this partition structure gives us control over who can access what in the domain. So the IT people from the UK will have their own DC that manages UK resources only. So a UK user would not be able to manage the US server. And that way, the domain administrators of each branch will have complete control over their respective DCs, but not the other branch's DCs. Policies can be figured independently for each domain in the tree. And we're going to say a new security group needs to be introduced when talking about trees and forests, the enterprise admins group. And this will grant user administrative privileges over all of the enterprise domains, and each domain would still have each domain admins with administrative privileges over the single domains. Enterprise admins can control everything within the enterprise. So recognize enterprise admins are a little bit higher than domain admins because enterprise admins can administer multiple domains, while domain admins are only relevant in their own individual domains. All right. Um, when it's talking about policies, yeah, like the UK typically has much more stringent policies regarding people's information and everything like that than the US. So they might have different policies regarding that. So um, that's just a little example. Obviously, there's a lot more that goes into it. Let's keep on trucking through though. Forest. So the domains you manage can also be configured in different namespaces. Suppose your company continues growing and eventually acquires another company called HT Inc. So when both companies merge, you'll probably have different domain trees for each company, each man by his own IT department. The union of several trees within or with different namespaces in the same network is known as a forest. So we're expanding on that TryHackMe tree that we just went over with the UK, the US, and the root. And we are now joining um, into a forest with the tree of MHT, where they also have a local, they have a Europe domain here as well as an Asia one. So cool. We're expanding. We're going really big international, and we don't want to have to administer everything the same way because it all could be different. We have different staff that's going to be doing different stuff. So that's how that operates. Having multiple domains organized in trees and forests allows you to have a nice compartmentalized network in terms of management and resources. But at a certain point, a user at TryHackMe UK might need access to a shared file in one of the MHT Asia servers. So for this to happen, domains arranged in trees and forests are joined together by what's called a trust relationship. All right. In simple terms, having a trust relationship between domains allows you to authorize user from the domain of TryHackMe UK to access resources from MHTEU. All right. The simplest trust relationship can be established as a one-way relationship and a one-way trust if domain AAA trusts domain BBB. That means that user on BBB can be authorized to access resources on AAA. Okay, because domain AA trusts domain BBB. So that trust has been established. It can access resources. One thing to note, the direction of the one-way relationship is contrary to that of the access direction. All right, so again, we're going to say a little bit slower now. Domain AAA trusts domain BBB, which then means the user on BBB can access resources on domain AAA. A user on domain AAA cannot access um, a file on domain BBB in this configuration because domain BBB has not set up a trust relationship going to domain AAA. All right. It's one way and it's kind of inverse of what it initially sounds like. Now, two-way trust relationships can also be made to allow both domains to mutually authorize users from the other. By default, joining several domains under a tree or a forest will form a two-way trust relationship. And it's important to note that having a trust relationship between domains doesn't automatically grant access to all resources on other domains. Once a trust relationship is established, you have the chance to authorize users across different domains, but it's up to you what you actually authorize or not. So what that's saying is, you remember when we were on the domain controller and we can add users or even workstations in that hang on, let me bring it up really quick. All right. So this is gonna take a little. All right. So when we do like delegate control, all right, and all I'm trying to do is get to this box. All right. You see where it says from this location? If the proper trust has been administered, we would be able to pick other locations here, such as in this example, honestly, you know, like the UK guy, maybe there's a trust where it allows the US IT admin to perform a password reset or something to that extent. So then he could say, all right, from that area, from that location of US, we can then add their IT staff. All right. So that's what trust and relationships will allow you to do. Um, but it gets even more granular. Like you can have this one particular folder. You can go into properties, settings, and then find the specific security group that you're looking for. Maybe it's a sales team in the UK sharing data with the sales team with the US side and things like that. So Active Directory can become very complicated, very messy, but if it's administered correctly, it's honestly not that bad. All right, so let's look at our questions here. What is a group of Windows domains that share the same namespace called? That's going to be a tree. All right, so remember, boom, they have the same namespace. They have the thm.local, thm.local, thm.local. That's different from the forest, where these guys are MHT. All right, so what should be configured between two domains for a user in domain A to access a resource in domain B? So what we need here is a trust relationship. All right. And with that being said, we did it. We got through the Windows 80 basics room. All right. I know it says it was 30 minutes. It's obviously been longer than 30 minutes. I hope you I hope this video actually helped. I hope that you guys skip through whatever you guys need to, play it on fast forward. I don't know. Only actually look at the parts that you're stuck at. But thank you all for joining me on this one. We still got a good amount more to go, so we'll just keep on going till we can properly take that SAL1 exam. All right. You have a good one. Thanks.